الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم تقبل توبتنا وأجب دعوتنا واسلل سخيمة من قلوبنا. Ask Allah to make us of those who repent back to Him, and that He purifies us, and that He accepts whatever we put forward towards Him Jalla wa Ala. Before we begin this new book, I think it's important if we have a history lesson. Allah tells us in the Quran in several places that He created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Many places in the Quran it says خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش. He created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and then He separated Himself from the rest of creation Jalla wa Ala. He was already separate, but He rose above His arsh. Despite the fact that Allah created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, the Prophet ﷺ has told us, لو كانت الدنيا تعدل عند الله جناح بعوضة, if the whole dunya, which He took 6 days to create, was equivalent to the size of a wing of a mosquito, ما سقى كافر منها شربة ماء, He wouldn't have even given the person who rejects Him arrogantly even a drop of water. Allah created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, but it's still something which is highly insignificant with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, this is the land that we are in right now, which has a resident that has been here since the time of our father Adam alayhi salam. The oldest resident on this planet is Iblis and Shaitan himself. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth, He then gave a command to Iblis, and Iblis rejected. But he had one supplication to Allah, which Allah granted. قال ربي فانذرني إلى يوم يبعثون. O Allah, give me respite until the day of judgment. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the heavens and the earth, and it's not significant to Him at all subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, He will destroy it as if it never existed at one point. But Shaitan asked to have respite until Yawm al-Qiyamah on this place. So right now, Shaitan is using the time until he has until Yawm al-Qiyamah to pull us towards something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't really care about. Something which is really insignificant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the more the Shaitan pulls, the more oppression and corruption will spread on earth. The more he uses us and pulls us towards the dunya, the more he will use humans to fulfill his objectives. And when his objectives have been spread, the spread of shirk, the spread of major sins, etc., he will then reject you and refuse you and spit you out after he's chewed you. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you from the very beginning, this is the land of fitna, and this is the land that Shaitan wants to corrupt you in. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He placed this oldest resident with our father Adam alayhi salam, Allah told us from the very beginning, قُلْ نَحْبِتُ مِنْهَا جَمِيعًا, all of you leave Jannah together. فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُمْ مِنِّي هُدًى فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Live on earth, the place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have any kind of wanting to keep you there for. However, I will support you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ, in another ayah, فَلَا يُدِلُّ وَلَا يَشْقَى. My guidance will come to you on earth. Even though you're not supposed to stay there, even though it is not significant with Allah, stay there and my guidance will come to you. And if you accept that guidance, there will be no need for you to be upset, there will be no need for you to be scared, and you will not face any kind of sadness. In the separate ayah, فَلَا يَدِلُّ وَلَا يَشْقَى, he will not be misguided, and he will not be of those people who are in a state of suffering. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent us the hidayah. And the hidayah that we know today, and what we call it, is al-Islam. But the ulama use the word such as Iman and Islam and Deen and Hidayah and all of these things synonymously. They all mean and refer to the same thing. Therefore, in this ayah, the only way that you can save yourself from being in a land where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that He is going to create only to test us in, and if you do not follow that guidance, then you will fall into sadness, you will fall into depression, you will fall into anguish, you will fall into the plots of shaitan himself. But if you are on this land and you follow that hidayah that comes to you, you will have something that the rest of creation will never experience. You will have something that the rest of creation can never really understand. You try to speak to somebody who doesn't have hidayah, who doesn't have Islam, doesn't have Iman, the concept of praying 5 times a day, the concept of tawakkul, the concept of having hope and fear and seeking the akhirah and being good towards other people and having upright manners and morals, they probably won't agree with you. They'll probably say to you, this is a thing that was said to me recently, where's the fun? Where's the fun? Therefore, Allah Jalla wa Ala has said that this is the hidayah. And if you leave the hidayah, shaitan will pull you. What we have now is a book that we're going to take in which it explains the completion of this hidayah, the completion of this religion, and why it is so perfect. And it was written by Muhammad bin Saaleh al-Uthaymin, rahimahullah, in which he called it Mabahith fi Usul al-Din. Chapters, you can say, or aspects of the foundations of this religion. And this is the book where he is talking about now the perfection of Islam. Now, before we enter into this book, it's important for us to know what Islam actually is. Because some people will say Islam means peace. And when they use peace, what they actually mean to say is, I can be a very liberal person, I don't need to be a practicing Muslim, and I can still have Islam. Because it is peace. As long as I'm peaceful, as long as I'm good. Other people will say Islam is a way of life. And when they say Islam is a way of life, sometimes they mean it in a political sense. So now you will think, I put on the news, there's a Muslim, after Salatul Jum'ah, you find him going to London Bridge and he's stabbing people just randomly. How can somebody do something like that and then call himself Muslim on top of that? And then say that he's doing that for the sake of the religion? How does that make sense? That is because he thinks Islam is a way of life, a political way of life. And if you don't agree with my political way of life, I will kill you, I will punish you, I'll be violent towards you. Therefore, the way we interpret, even just defining what Islam actually is very, very important. It goes back to our Aqidah, and it goes back to how you understand the rest of what we will take in this book and the rest of your life, really. Because like we've said before, you have people, you try and give them advice and trying to make them better Muslims and upright. They will say, no, Islam is peace. You don't need to waste your time with me, but I'm finding myself. And then there's other people who will become a bit more extreme and they're not so tolerant and they're very aggressive because their definition of Islam is different. Islam means submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in doing the things that He has told us to do and staying away from the things that He has told us to stay away from. فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَى فَلَا يُضِلُّ وَلَا يَشْقَى. If you follow the hidayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to you and you submit to Him, unlike what Iblis did, and you follow the commands unlike what Iblis did, and you stay away from what is haram, unlike what Iblis did, you will be protected in this temporary abode that Allah has placed you in. And if you don't have that Islam, that correct definition, practically and in your Aqidah, then it's very likely that Iblis will catch you one way or another. But what is that hidayah? How can we recognize that hidayah? How do we know that this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is another very important question. Can mankind formulate their own way of life? So now the problem is people will say, I don't need to follow Islam, I don't need to follow religion, or I can follow Islam or follow a religion, but I can use the things which I think are good for me, and I can leave the things which are bad for me, and that I think will be peace in my life. That will be the perfection that I am looking for. But is that right or is that wrong? Let me give you another political and very contemporary example. Fossil fuels. Fossil fuels. What's the ruling on using fossil fuels? Coal, petrol, gas. What's the ruling?
Permissible.
Can you put petrol in your car?
Yeah.
Can you put gas in your cooker? It's permissible. I don't think any scholar will say that it's haram.
Subsidy.
Say?
Subsidy, I'm sure.
Yeah, so because we're using it, we need it, etc. Fossil fuels are permissible to use. That is something that we will agree with, and those people who say that you can formulate your own way of life will also agree with. We have a common denominator in using something which is of benefit. All of it is mubah. However, if it becomes clear to you that by using these fossil fuels you are damaging the environment, by using these fossil fuels you are harming Allah's creation, by using these fossil fuels you are doing something which is actually not pleased to Allah, do you fall under that ayah that we just talked about? فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَاءَ فَلَا يَضِلُّ وَلَا يَشْقَى وَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَاءَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا يَحْزَنُونَ. Does it change the ruling from being mubah into something which is haram? If I know that something is permissible for me to use right now, but I know by using it, it will harm people, does the ruling change? Changes automatically. Now, why am I using that as an example? The reason why I'm using that as an example is because how many years? 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years we've been using fossil fuels, and I think, this is advancements, this is technology, this is how humankind has developed. And we are much better than the rest of all of those backward people. That's because we are doing something that those guys didn't know. We can formulate our own way of life because our own intellect and our own skills are telling us to do so. But now, after 60, 70 years, we need to change that. We've made a mistake. And for 60, 70 years, we've been corrupting the environment. And if we don't do something about it now, there's going to be very serious repercussions. This is just a simple example of using fossil fuels. How about something where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-Alim, al-Khabir, the person who knows us, who's created us and knows us better than ourselves, has told us, do not do shirk. I am putting you on a planet and you have an enemy next to you, his name is Iblis. And if you'd follow Iblis, you will then fall into corruption and misery, and he will make your life hell. But if you follow Islam and you follow the guidance, you will remain upright. How about when we are falling into shirk, when we are falling into major sins? Oh, I've done a major sin, I'm still alive, nothing's wrong with me, I've still got my limbs, still got my senses. But what's it doing? If this can happen with fossil fuels, which you are actually benefiting from, after 50, 60, 70 years, and then it corrupts us now, because some places are so fogged up you can't even see, the pollution is so serious in certain countries, or whether it's going to be your progeny in the future, by doing something which is mubah, has affected the whole dunya. So imagine shirk, imagine major sins, imagine all of those different things that are happening, that Allah, our Creator, has told us, do not do them, and do this and do not do that, because there will be repercussions. Therefore, the Muslim has a way of life, and that way of life is perfect, and that way of life has always been the haqq since day one. But now, going back to this point here about the fossil fuels, now, like we've said, there is a common denominator. We will say now that it used to be mubah, but now it's become haram. And it could be now, and there's a different government that says, yeah, it used to be permissible, but now we're going to stop using fossil fuels. Therefore, our way of life and your way of life is kind of similar, isn't it? Because you're saying something used to be okay, but now it's not okay, but we're saying it used to be okay, but it's not okay. It's kind of similar. There's one thing, like we just mentioned a moment ago, that only the Muslim, that only the person who has that history lesson firm in his head and he reminds himself consistently of it, it is only that person who will understand the difference between the person who is trying to do good in the dunya for the sake of the dunya and a person who's trying to do good for the sake in the dunya for the sake of making his Lord happy. So when we say fossil fuels used to be permissible but now it's haram, and then there's a government that says fossil fuels used to be permissible but now it's haram, it's illegal. What's the difference? The biggest difference is that the Muslim has iman. The Muslim has taqwa. The Muslim sees consequences. The Muslim acts for the last day. Whereas most of the dunya, even those people within Islam, unfortunately, act only for the sake of the dunya. And their consequences are only in the sake of the dunya. And when they are doing that, they are falling into a fitna which they themselves cannot recognize as happening to them. That's why this book becomes very important, because there are certain things that we can see which are obvious. Do this, don't do that. But there are certain things that we will not see in our lives perhaps, because we have iman, we have taqwa, we want to do what is right because our Lord has told us that this is right, and we might not see the consequences right away, and even if we never see the consequences, we know that there is a last day. Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah, in the introduction of this book, after sending peace and blessings of Allah and after praising Allah and sending peace and blessings of Allah upon His Messenger and the Khutbatul Hajah, he said, "Amma ba'd, فَهَذِهِ رِسَالَةٌ." This is a short treatise in which he is going to look at the different aspects of Islam. And this is actually a book that he wrote, which was intended, I'm not sure if it continues until now, going to be studied in higher education, Mahad al-Ilmiya in Riyadh. That is going to be used in the intermediary or the intermediate level of the Institute of Knowledge in Riyadh and Dar al-Tawheed, and also in Jami' Islamiyya in al-Madinah, the Islamic University in Medina, and other places. He authored this book so that people can have an understanding as to what Islam is and what Islam consists of. And walillahi alhamd, this is going to be the third or the fourth time I read this book, and every time I read it I think that this book is absolutely amazing. Because what he describes to us are the aspects of Tawheed, but he then gives us the reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated a life for the way that we live our life. And he explains that the reason why you are living a life as a Muslim is because of this, and it's stopping you from that. And if you had Islam in your life properly, you would have a lot of perfection. Therefore, this book, we'll try to do it justice as much as we can, and it's a very small book, it's only 30-something pages. And we will try and give as many contemporary examples as we can, but like I said, I think for the sake of keeping it concise, we will go over the book in a balanced manner. But really, I think it's one of those books that we would really need to have translated, and so that we can go over again, and perhaps even the Tullab al-Ilm and even the Mashayikh who can speak English look at this book and make it more advanced and put some footnotes and put some examples, so that people can really evolve this book. My point is, so that people can see the purpose as to why the Shaykh wrote it, number one, and the perfection of Islam that he is talking about, rahimahullah. So in the first chapter he said, Ad-Din al-Islami daruratun ijtima'iyyatun, that Islam is an absolute social necessity liruqya hayat al-insaniyya, so that the life of the human being within a social setting is of a way which is perfected, of a way which is upright, of a way which is pure. And in this chapter, what he is going to talk about, rahimahullah, are the reasons why Islam is needed in the dunya, why the world needs Islam, why the world needs a religion, but specifically, why does the world need Islam? And he begins in the first paragraph by saying, rahimahullah, that society has mixtures of beliefs and objectives, and that's always going to be the case. It is always going to be the case that no two human beings will have the exact same Aqidah, and no two human beings will have the exact same beliefs and objectives. He said that's always happened. المجتمع الإنسانية مختلف في أفكاره ومقاصده. Human societies will always differ on the way that they think, the way that they believe, and their objectives. Therefore, the Shaykh is saying now, based on that fact, he said mankind has a need for guidance. Because we have so many different beliefs and so many different ideas, we don't know which one is the right one. Remember, like we said before, this is a very important point that he is mentioning. Because a person might say, I don't need religion, I am upright in myself. Or I am very, very educated, and I don't need to follow your book or your messenger. But we know that shaitan has always been there. We know that shaitan has asked to have respite until Yawm al-Qiyamah. So how do we know? It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. You might not even have any obvious wasawis or anything, but how do we know that he hasn't infiltrated the way that you think? We don't know that. And it is very likely that he has, if a person is not following the hidayah, as the ayah said in the very beginning. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, that live on earth and be in there as enemies upon one another. But there will be my guidance that comes to you, and if you follow that guidance, look out for that guidance. If you follow that guidance, you'll be okay. If you reject it, then shaitan will infiltrate your life in one way or another. Therefore, the author is beginning by saying that mankind has a need for that guidance because it is connected to the incident that happened thousands, millions and billions, Allah knows best, of how long ago. And with that, the Shaykh then says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of those differences within society, the mixture of beliefs and objectives, has always sent prophets in order to tell them what that right way actually is. So you will always have societies with mixed ideas, mixed beliefs, mixed objectives, etc. But Allah has never left a nation or a country or a language or a background except that He has sent a prophet to that nation to explain to them what the truth is. And he gives many examples, and we know them in the Quran. If you recite the Quran, they appear over and over again, to the extent that some of the ulama have said that this is a third of the Quran. The coming of prophets to different nations and to different regions is a third of the Quran. Inna arsalna Nuhan ila qawmih, as he quotes here, wa ila ajin akhahum huda. And he gives many examples, with Qari Isa ibn Maryam, ya bani Israel, etc. But now the author makes a very important point, which is that the time that we are living in now, is there a Nabi that's going to come and he says, right, vote for this political party or vote for that political party? Is that going to happen? Is the Nabi going to come and say that group of people are wrong and this group of people are wrong? It's not going to happen. That means these ayat, and the point that the Shaykh is making here, that guidance was limited to those groups of people in that time. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as a guide and a prophet to explain what the truth is to all of humanity. As it occurs in the hadith, وَبُعِثْتُ إِلَى النَّاسِ عَامًّا, I have been sent to all of mankind. Therefore, every single country and nation and background had their own prophet and they had their own Nabi to tell them that this is the right way. All of these are wrong and all of those are wrong. These are wrong for whatever reason, these are wrong for whatever reason. But Muhammad ﷺ has come, and ever since he came, all falsehood has been eradicated until Yawm al-Qiyamah. So there is no new doubt or misconception or religion or call or da'wah except that the Prophet ﷺ has addressed it already. Because he is a guide and a prophet to all of mankind. That's one point that the Shaykh mentions. But there's another point that the Shaykh mentions also, which is that the prophets and the religions and the shariahs and the ummahs that came before us, they were limited not only to their time and their geographical location, but it was also limited in the way that they could benefit mankind. Therefore, the Prophet ﷺ coming, he is not exclusive to any group, to any country, to any language. He is a mercy and a prophet to all of mankind. That's point number one. But point number two, his religion that he has come with, this abrogating sharia, is so profound and is so powerful and is so perfect. The reason why it abrogates all the previous shariahs is because those previous shariahs might not and would not have been able to withstand until Yawm al-Qiyamah the different misconceptions and the different fitnas that would have occurred or are going to occur, except for the sharia of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he gives examples of that, rahimahullah ibn Uthaymin. He said, for example, before we had Isa alayhi salam. Before Isa alayhi salam, people had religion and people had ilm, but their hearts became hard. So he's talking about Bani Israel before the coming of Isa alayhi salam. They had a sharia, they had a prophet, they had prophets come to them, more than one. After Musa, they had Harun, Dawood, and Yusha. And every single one of them was explaining to them, this is the right way, those are wrong. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Constantly, stop doing that. This is the right way. Don't think like that. Stop. So before Isa alayhi salam, Bani Israel had that ilm. But after prophet, the cycle had to go round and round and round because they had ilm, but their hearts kept rejecting it. And from what they used to say is that they used to say that our society has developed and there's become an elite and there's become the working class. Therefore, if a prophet comes and a truth comes to us or a book comes to us and it doesn't satisfy the elite, then we will reject that call. But if it's good with the elite, then we'll accept that. That was one of the things and one of the patterns, like the Shaykh is mentioning here, that used to happen before the coming of Isa alayhi salam. Therefore, those prophets who came to explain to them the truth, that look, this is the elite, this is the working class, that was one of the misconceptions that they had to refute. Another thing that happened before the coming of Isa alayhi salam is that people had ilm, but they didn't want to practice religion. They had books, they had knowledge, they knew what was right, they knew what was wrong, but they didn't really want to act upon it. And another very common characteristic that you will find in the Quran, also in describing the Jahiliyyah that was there before the coming of Isa alayhi salam, which is that they had the truth come to them, but they only applied that which they wanted to apply for their own benefit, for the sake of the dunya. If there was no actual direct benefit, they wouldn't really act upon it. So Allah sent Isa alayhi salam. And then Isa came down and he came with a book, and he came with a new renewal of the truth to say, listen, X, Y, and Z you are doing, that is wrong, stop it. Now Isa alayhi salam, when he came, people started to believe in him. And those people that believed in him, they were people who wanted to do good, but they didn't have ilm. Why? Ilm was with the elite. And the working class, they didn't really get much of that knowledge. Yes, they had the belief and the revelation, etc. But all that kind of, they then had seeking the akhirah. They wanted to seek the akhirah. They had a good intention, but they were not able to preserve that ilm. So now what they did is they began to innovate in order to try and make Allah happy. So they created a new Aqidah, they created new acts of worship, they went into excessiveness. Therefore now, from Bani Israel, we have two factions. We have one who think that they can create their own way of life, their own religion, and that is based on some of the characteristics that they had. After Isa alayhi salam, there were certain characteristics that they had. And now the Shaykh makes a very important point. He said, what is the underlying principle and the factor that split up that society before the coming of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It is that the people who rejected Isa alayhi salam, the Jews, the party of the Jews at that time, it's not all of them, but just some of them at that time, they had the authority. And their religion was a religion of having power and authority, and they had kingship, they had prophets, they had ilm, they had power, they had a lot of money, they had a lot of economy. Whereas the Christians that came, they didn't have any of those things, but they had worship. They had a lot of worship, they had a lot of tazkiyah, they had a lot of heart softeners, they had a lot of ways of trying to get closer to Allah. So they made monks and they made monasteries and things that the Jews didn't do before, the Christians started doing. Why? Because they wanted to get closer to Allah. The Shaykh is mentioning here now, Islam came and it abrogated both of those. The reason why is because if you just got authority all the time and no tazkiyah and no worship, then there's going to be oppression and there's going to be hardness of your heart. But at the same time, if you're always trying to worship and have tazkiyah and have ilm and iman, etc., but you've not got any authority in the land, then that's not going to do, it's not going to spread the religion of Islam, it's not going to spread the truth. Islam came and is a religion of ilm and action. Islam came and is a religion of authority and tazkiyah. Islam came and is a religion of having power, but at the same time having that level of softness and seeking the akhirah. Therefore, when he opens this book, rahimahullah, he is explaining to us all of those other religions that came before. He's given some of what happened historically to the people of Bani Israel and what happened historically to the Christians, but these are just examples. And you can apply those examples to almost any other religion, any other kind of geographical location where there's been different ideas. Islam has come and it has fused what is good for mankind into one religion. Therefore, the Shaykh says, Islam becomes a religion of ilm and action, becomes a religion of authority and tazkiyah, becomes a religion where a person has a level of importance of making sure that the dunya is upright, but you do that for the sake of seeking the akhirah. Not like people who are following other religions, they want to follow and make the dunya upright for the sake of themselves and for the sake of their own people, or a group of people who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they might fall into shirk and innovations. That is because their religion is not complete and their way of worshipping, getting closer to Allah is not complete. Islam has come with both. And when you have that, the Shaykh is saying here that you benefit with Islam organizing your way of life in three very core principles of Islam. Number one, Islam gives you iman, and it gives you ilm, and it gives you manners, and it gives you tazkiyah. And when you have that, society will be based upon goodness with that good foundation of iman, of actions and good manners. That's one thing that Islam has that other religions don't have. So he said, rahimahullah, فَلَا رُقِيَ بِدُونْ إِلْمٍ وَلَا أَخْلَاقٍ بِدُونْ تَزْكِيَةٍ وَلَا نِظَامٍ بِدُونْ حِكْمَةٍ. Islam has come, and it says that you cannot become purified, you cannot become better unless you have knowledge. And you can never have manners until you have a level of tazkiyah and softness in your heart. And you can never have any kind of organization in your life unless you have wisdom. This is a very profound sentence from the Shaykh. You cannot have a softness and a rectification without ilm. You cannot have akhlaq and good upright manners without having a level of softness inside of yourself. And you cannot have organization in your life without wisdom. So the Shaykh is saying this is one of the factors of Islam and why we believe it's the truth and one of the principles to explain to us the perfection of Islam. Another thing that he says, rahimahullah, is that Islam came that other religions don't have, and other ways of life that exist that cannot give you, and it's not universal enough, is that واقع الدين الإسلامي ونظامه, that the actual reality of the religion of Islam and the way it organizes your life is based on intellect and education. And it preserves 5 core principles. Islam organizes your life and it preserves 5 core principles. Number 1, it preserves intellect and it preserves education. So Islam has come and it says every single one of us, to the best of our ability, must learn. Learn something which is good for your deen, or good for your akhirah, or do both if you can do both. Islam obligates this upon every single one of us. Is there any other way of life that does that? Not really. Even in this country, if you were to sign on and not go to university or school, they'll pay you your benefits. Alright, you won't have a good way of life, but they're not saying that it's wajib. Islam is saying no, it's wajib. It's wajib for us to learn and to become better and to become more intellectual and to benefit something in our deen and our dunya. That's point number 1. Point number 2, Islam has come to preserve human life. Irrespective of whether the person is Muslim or not Muslim, irrespective of whether the thing that you are trying to preserve is a human being or an animal or a plant or the ecosystem or the environment, Islam has come to preserve life. How do you know Islam is perfect? Because Islam does everything what it can to preserve life, or what we can, in our ability. The third thing that Islam came to preserve is your wealth. So Islam says you are not allowed to oppress one another in our wealth. In actual fact, what we have to do is engage and create a productive economy where everybody is benefiting mutually. So it's not permissible for a group of people to oppress the higher group of people to oppress the lower group of people, or to have the rich people to oppress the poor people by putting riba on them and all those different things. And he's going to explain them, but this is just the introduction. Wealth is preserved. Your honor is preserved. It's not permissible for a person to talk about other people, to expose other people. You will never find in an Islamic model where a person has done a major sin and then will put his name and his face in front on the newspapers or on the news. It's not permissible. You will not find that in Islam. Breaking news, somebody has done a major sin. You won't find that. That is because Islam preserves your honor and your dignity. And it wants you to be upright. If you have slipped up and you have done something wrong, we're not going to expose you. We're going to take you by your hand and say, Akhi, make istighfar, become a better person. What do you need? And the 5th thing that Islam came is to preserve religion. It came to preserve what other religions and other ways of life before had done incorrectly. And it is from the hikmah, and it's a miracle in itself, that Islam remains preserved until today. We have different ideas in different sects, fair enough. But the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تزال طائفة من أمتي, there will always be a group until the Day of Judgment that has the pure Islam, just the way that the Prophet ﷺ and the companions. Is that not a miracle? Of course it's a miracle. Because all these other religions got corrupted. Humankind cannot preserve something even if they wanted to preserve it. This is a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore Islam as a religion gives you success in the deen, in this dunya, and for your akhirah also. So now, in this introduction, the Shaykh is saying here, number 1, groups have come before us, but they were not complete. Islam has come and is giving you that completion. Number 2, Islam has 5 core principles for us to know why it is perfect. And this is the core of it, this is the foundation. When we can understand that these are the 5, then the rest of the book he is going to explain this further. And number 3, he's saying here in the introduction, how do we know Islam is perfect? Anybody can say that I have got the perfect way of life. We have person A and you have person B. Person A says, this is my manifesto, these are the rules that I'm saying that you should live by, and I think this is perfect. Person B will say, no, this is what I think you should live by, and I think this is perfect. Now you're thinking, which one is better, A or B? And you think, you know what, I think A is better. He's telling us to do good, he's telling us to stay away from bad. I'll go with A. I will choose A because I think he has the better way of life. The only way, the Shaykh is saying here in point number C, the only way that you can tell something is perfect and something is true and something is actually good for us is by the effects it has on humankind. Anybody can say that they've got the haqq, but if that haqq is given to that person and to that society, and after 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years there's been no goodness, there's actually been more corruption, and things are going bad, then there is something wrong. And this is something that even the kuffar now in politics are saying now. They're saying that the way of life that we are living right now, there is something wrong because society is going down, our economy is going down, crime is going up, there's a gap between different human rights, and there's human rights issues even in our own country when we're trying to say that we've got the best human rights. Therefore, whenever you say you've got the haqq, the Shaykh is saying here, you can only actually determine whether that haqq is actually the haqq by the effects it has on a person. The Shaykh is saying here, what are the effects of Islam? There is nothing which is compared to the effects that a person has, or Islam has on a person. And the Shaykh is saying here, if you don't believe us, if you think that this is just a statement and we're being biased, he is saying you can look at history. If you look at history, we will see how Islam gave honor and izzah to a small group of people who are not educated. And then it spread. And then it became a superpower for not 1 century, not 2 centuries, not 3, for almost 10 plus centuries, Islam. And there are so many things that we're benefiting now, including the electricity, including the screens that we have, including aviation, including so many different things, mathematics. All of that has the foundation from the effects of Islam on mankind. Therefore, the Shaykh is saying here, you can only actually really tell the truth of something by the effects it has on that thing. But he makes a point which is a very interesting point and a very important point, which is that you can only benefit from something if you hold on to it properly. If you're not holding on to something properly, then it will fall. And then you will not benefit from it. And then you will say, no, it's that thing that fell, that's that fall. It wasn't perfect enough for me to hold it. It was maybe too hot, maybe it was too cold. The Shaykh is saying that is not right. If you hold on to Islam correctly, you will see the perfection of Islam. Shall we start the next chapter or shall we stop? The next chapter, the Shaykh is saying here, why other religions fall short in providing success and fall short in giving us a universal way of life for mankind and giving them true happiness. Why is it that Islam is the religion that will always be the truth from the time of Adam until the last man? Why is it Islam is the religion that will give you uprightness whether you're living in the Far East or the Far West? And why is it that we are saying that this is the only haqq and there is no other haqq? Because this is the only way that you can have happiness. The Shaykh said, rahimahullah, that before, like we said before, and like we said, this is some of it's going to be repetition because of what he said in the introduction. He said before, there were 3 religions, or there are right now 3 religions that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which are known as the Samawiyah, as the heavenly religions. The Jews, the Christians, and Islam. Now he said that the religion that was given to the Yahud, in the end of it, it wasn't complete. And the religion that was given to the Christians, by the end of it, it wasn't complete. Therefore, the benefits that they had in both of those religions either had been changed or they were limited. So Islam has now come to abrogate all other religions. And he gives examples, and he's going to give plenty of examples in a minute. But that's one very important principle. How do we know Islam is universal? Is because there is no other religion that's going to come after it. The second thing that he has said, rahimahullah, is that Islam is not a religion of difficulty and excessiveness. And when it is not a religion of difficulty and excessiveness, it then means that Islam is a religion of ease and hikmah. It is a religion of ease and hikmah. So now in this chapter, the Shaykh is saying, how do we know that Islam is universal? Number one, it is for all of mankind. And number two, is a religion of ease and hikmah. Let me give you an example. If a person is living in a country and the government are stopping them from doing certain things as being a Muslim, does that mean he has no Islam left? No, it doesn't. It just means that he can't practice that thing and Allah is not going to punish him. Does it mean that he will be sinful? No, it doesn't. Does it mean that there's no alternative? Yes, there probably is an alternative. That means now that Islam has not left you abandoned in any aspect of your life. That clearly shows us that Islam is providing us with a success and a route and a way of life, irrespective of where you live, irrespective of what generation you came in, and irrespective of your situation. A person who is free and the person who is in jail. The person who is in jail, does that mean now he is isolated? He has no ahkam in the Sharia? He has. And he can actually become somebody who is, finding goodness in his life despite being in jail. And how many examples do we have of that? Plenty. People are being oppressed in other countries because they are Muslim or whatever reason. Does that mean their Islam falls and they have no way of life anymore? No, it doesn't. It means that they can have some concessions, and it actually means that they're being expiated for certain things. Now, that is a very important point, because no other religion and no other way of life can give you that, irrespective of how advanced we are or we think we are as human beings. So now if a person is living in an oppressed situation and he has no religion, let's say, and he's being oppressed, what does that person end up doing? He ends up acting irrationally. Maybe he might even end up committing suicide, as we see in this country. You end up seeing them doing things and they don't know how to behave anymore, because they thought they had something which was civilized, and it probably was civilized, but it's not universal enough. Islam has come as an abrogator for any other way of life, so nothing else is acceptable, whether it's a religion which was sent before as a book through a prophet, etc., or whether that thing has been created by mankind themselves. That's point number one. And point number two, it gives wisdom and ease. And it gives you so many different flexibility that you can always still be a Muslim in a majority Muslim country or a minority. You can still have that success, you can still have that goodness in your life. And the Shaykh now gives a few examples, and we'll take these examples and we'll stop with that. He said, فَمِنْ ذَلِكَ أَنَّ الصَّلَاةَ لَا تُقَامْ إِلَّا فِي أَمَاكِنٍ. Now, talking about those other religions, they had a level of difficulty and excessiveness. So certain religions and certain way of life, until today, they will only worship, if they do worship, they will only worship in a particular place. They will only worship in a particular place. Islam says you can worship Allah everywhere. If you're at work, if you're at home. But for certain religions, you have to go to a particular temple or to a particular church or next to a particular idol, and that's the only place where you can worship. So the Shaykh is saying here, the point that he is making, is that for many different ways of life, there is only one way of seeking spiritual happiness. And when that spiritual happiness is not there, they think, you know what, I don't believe in God anymore. They end up becoming atheist or agnostic. I do believe in a God, but I don't know who that is. And then they just become completely liberal in their life. So if you ask them, do you not believe in a God? I do believe in a God, but I'd rather go out night clubbing on a Friday, Saturday night. Why are you doing that? Don't you believe in a God? Yeah, but I don't know. So they don't want to talk about it because they've had some kind of spirituality in their life, but it wasn't fulfilling for them. There was only one way to have that spirituality. And when it didn't work, it all just fell. The Shaykh is saying here, the previous religions had that. Islam is perfect because it is not limited in how you can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's point number one. Point number two. He gives another example now of tahara. أَنَّ مَنْ عُدِمَ الْمَاءِ If a person doesn't have any water, in our religion we can perform tayammum. This is a fiqhi example that we study in our fiqh lessons. If you don't have any water, you're not able to use the water, you can perform tayammum. Now, the Shaykh is saying, the point that he's making here, we know that Islam is a perfection, a religion of perfection, because purification for some people is either something which they are too easy and lenient over, or some people, when it comes to purification, they are too excessive and have difficulty. So give you an example. At the time of Bani Israel, if something of najasa fell onto their clothes, were they able to wash it? They had to cut it off, and they were never able to use it again. So imagine some najasa fell on your clothes, urine or feces or something. You'd literally have to cut it off and throw it in the bin, and you can never wash it. That was part of the way that's excessiveness. That is not universal. That is not catering for all different people with needs, etc. Imagine you got an illness. What would you do then? That's one extreme. But then you've got another extreme, which I think most of society falls into today, where they have no concern for tahara at all, or najasa. Anything could be pure, anything could be impure. They can have impurities on their clothes, etc. And there is no real concern. Islam has come to teach us to be upright in your own personal hygiene. It has come and has told us to be upright and to clean your body in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created you in the first place. Another example that the Shaykh gives, and he gives an example of wealth now, which is in the previous religions, people were not allowed to eat, or they were not allowed to benefit from war booty. So if they went to war and they captured some wealth from another group of people, they would have to leave it there, and a fire would come from the sky and it would used to destroy it. Whereas this religion has come and it says, no, you can benefit from something that you have taken in a prescribed manner. Now the point that we learn from this, I think that this is just an example, but what we learn from this is that people financially have become very easygoing, or they have become very excessive. Now, there was a recent report in saying that this country has become so capitalistic, that there's become a huge gap between those people who are rich and those people who are poor. And the reason why most people in society are suffering is because there is a huge gap between the people who are rich and the people who are poor. And the wealth in this country is not evenly distributed. So that the wealth of the rich keeps accumulating, and the poverty of the people who are poor is getting worse and worse. And there's no way out for them, and these guys are getting richer. Islam says that you won't have that imbalance. Islam says you can't have that imbalance. And this is just another example of it. The previous religions, some people made halal into haram and haram into halal, and they didn't really care. And this happened to the Jews and it happened to the Christians. So if like we said before, if some of the Yahud and the people at that time, they didn't like it, they changed their religion. Or they rejected what the Prophet said to them. And some of the Christians did something similar. And other religions did something similar. But we, as Muslims, like we've said, Islam is to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with obedience and staying away from whatever is disobedience. We do not change what is halal and haram. Therefore, we leave all goodness and all harm with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed for us. So now, for example, if a person says, this is an actual example, a person says zina is okay, Allah protect us. So this man, he performed zina with so many different women for 20, 30 years. And then, after 20, 30 years, he thought, you know what, let me just get married, have kids, relax, stop doing this life. But in himself, I had fun, it was good. Then when he got married, etc., he thought, you know, astaghfirullah, that was bad. That wasn't good. I mean, imagine if I have a daughter now, would I want that? If I have a son now, would I want that? It's not a good way of life. Why don't I just get married in the first place and, you know, become responsible in the first place, etc. So he made istighfar and he made tawbah. He goes, for those 20, 30 years, he didn't get any STDs, he didn't have any problems in his life, everything was fine. After he got married, he started having children. And his son, eldest son, falls into the same problem, womanizing. He speaks to his son, stop doing this, it's haram. What's the problem? Son doesn't know anything about it. But the father is now, Allah knows best, is being tested and punished perhaps for what he did for 20, 30 years, so many women. And now the son is doing exactly the same thing, and he's trying to speak to his son, and he's telling his son, this is haram and this is halal. The son is saying, no. Haram is halal and halal is haram. Halal marriage, that's haram for me. And haram, which is the zina, is halal for me. He's changed it. But the father had already changed it, but then he made tawbah and he went into what is halal and he stayed away from what is haram. Look at the effects. What are the effects? We do not know the effects. For 20, 30 years, he didn't see any effect. But then when he got married, 40th year, maybe the 50th year, Allah knows best. Now he sees the effect. Astaghfirullah, what have I been doing? We've been using fossil fuels for 70 years. Now, look what's happening to the oceans. Look what's happening. We do not know. The Shaykh is saying here, the previous religions, they change halal into haram, haram into halal. Easy. We just follow our desires. We live for the sake of the dunya. It catches up to them afterwards. Islam has told us from the very beginning, this is halal, these are your boundaries. This is haram, those. Whether you understand it or not, those are your boundaries. And if you stick to those boundaries, Allah will give you wisdom, Allah will give you ilm, Allah will give you hikmah, Allah will give you hidayah. And perhaps one day you will understand why those circles are there. But even if you don't understand that, at least if you stick to that, you will have hidayah, you will have goodness, you will have tranquility, you will have comfort, you will have blessings, you will have all of those things that the rest of mankind want, and they are forming their own halal and haram, but then they all end up falling anyway. The Shaykh is saying, how do we know Islam is correct? We know Islam is correct because it has given you that which is tayyib, and it has told you to stay away from that which is haram, and it has told you that these are the effects. And if you fall into it, then you will be affected with those effects, whether it's now or tomorrow. The Shaykh says also, another reason why Islam is correct is because it has remained the haqq since the day it came. And this is very important. This month, next month, they're going to say that God has a son and he was born on that day, and his mother, who is the mother of God, gave birth to the son of God. That means God was carried for a period of 9 months in the womb of a mother who was the mother of God, and then he was born, and then he was then killed. All of those things, may Allah protect us. The problem with that, how does a person end up saying those kind of things? From Tawheed, like we said, from a book that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from a Nabi that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Isa alayhi salam. How did they end up so far away? How did they get to that stage? The Shaykh is saying here, once they changed halal into haram and haram into halal, what happens? You keep changing it. I changed something, nothing happened. Let's change it again, let's change it again, let's change it again. Until what happens? Kufr, shirk, nifaq, all of those things become part of the religion. How do we know Islam is the haqq? It is the haqq as the Prophet ﷺ, on that day he came. Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. Today is the day that we have perfected our religion for you, and it will remain that case. That wahi is not going to change. That sahih sunnah is not going to change. That understanding, that perfection is not going to change until Yawm al-Qiyamah. But a person then will say, well, why do you have so many different sects? then? Why do you have so many different understandings of Islam? Is your perfection the same as the Brehvi and the Sufi perfection and the Shia perfection? Why is there so many? He says his life is perfect. Added to this point where you keep changing, this now includes innovations and different manhaj which come into our religion. And this is a big problem. And in actual fact, it's becoming an even bigger problem than it was before. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke the truth. There is no time except that the time after it is going to be worse. So now, why do people, let me ask you this question, why do people perform al-Mawlid Nabawi today? Most people, why do people practice the Prophet's birthday and celebrate?
It's how they express their love.
How? But where does it come from?
Nowhere, but that's what they say.
Culturally, really. They're doing it because my dad did it, my grandfather does it, so we'll go to that same mosque and we'll do it for that reason. What's happening now is because we started changing already, that changing is already carrying on, but it's happening now in a worse way, in a more sinister way. Because now it's not cultural changing anymore. It's more of a fanatic and a more of a desire-based changing. So now if tomorrow a person is doing taqleed of another way, they will usually be making taqleed because it suits their desires. And we're already seeing that. We're already seeing people making taqleed of another opinion which is not the correct opinion. And if you speak to him, perhaps he will admit that, I don't think really that's the correct opinion, but the Mufti gave me the answer, so I'm going to follow it. It's not becoming cultural anymore. This is the reason why is because people have been changing the religion, and they've been doing it under the name of culture. That's a Pakistani mosque, that is an Arab mosque, that is. But now what we are seeing is people are changing and making taqleed based on their desires and based on their own limited intellects. So it could be that tomorrow people are practicing the Milad al-Nabi because that's how they want to express their love. Nothing to do with what my granddad did. I just think it's a good idea. I just think it's something that is fitting for the 21st century. And that kind of rhetoric now is growing. Now, it's just an example, but you find that in different areas, the way that people are wearing the hijab and the way that people are getting involved in their economics, etc. All of those things are coming about because people have been changing. But the Shaykh is mentioning the point here is that the truth has always been one, and that truth will always remain. And we can know that it is the truth because it is based on textual evidence and it hasn't been changed. Next week we will carry on with the next chapter, and the next chapter the Shaykh is talking about the perfection of Islam and the effects that it has on mankind and on their lives. I ask Allah to give us iman and tawfiq, and He gives us the ability to benefit from what we have heard and implement them, and that He takes us in a state that He is pleased with us. هذا والله أعلم وصلى اللهم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Anybody got any questions? So next week, inshallah.